Did you know that when you were born, you didn't have a predetermined set body weight? In the same way, when you were born, you didn't have a predetermined set lifespan. Just like you can control your weight, you can control your lifespan and how great you feel. I'm Dr. Harold Minkowitz. I'm a physician and clinical researcher. I've conducted about 300 clinical research trials. About 10 years ago, I started realizing I was feeling sluggish, I had low energy levels, feeling bloated, and just generally didn't feel great. What I did was I researched the literature to understand the state of the art in longevity, health, and diet. As a result of this, I've adapted my life and my habits. Since then, my weight has dropped, my energy levels have increased, and I really feel wonderful every single day. What I've done is I've distilled these life-changing longevity practices into 5 keys. In this talk, I will share these keys with you. I'll explain to you how it all works at a biological level, so you can understand the science behind these 5 keys. This presentation is a culmination of years of research by some of the most preeminent scientists in the area of health, longevity, and wellness. I hope that it arms you with the knowledge you need to live a long, happy, healthy, and energized life.
Before I get going, I want to acknowledge a few people. First of all, I wouldn't be a good son if I didn't acknowledge my mom. I don't know how she knew all of these things all those years ago before there's the internet, all these papers were done. But basically, her basic principles she taught me as a child apply today. You also see some 3 men as well on this screen as well. These are pioneers in longevity research and writing and talking about longevity as well. So, before I get going, I'm not sure, has anybody here thought how long you want to live for? 88? Is that anybody else over 88? Do I hear 90? Do I hear 100? Anybody beat that? 94. Okay. So I think the concept is we don't really think about what age we want to be when we die. We want to think rather how well we are and can we actually do the things we want to do at that age. We don't want our age and our physical status to hold us back from doing the things we want to do. So where we are today is that we think about people living to their twilight years with broken hips, various diseases, chemotherapy, and basically not being able to do what they want to do. And unfortunately, most of the money we spend in healthcare in the US in the last few years of life are spent on maintaining those last few years of life. And unfortunately, the quality of life for a lot of people isn't great towards the end. What we want to do is increase our health span. And what the health span is the portion of our lives we spend without disease and disability, and we can actually be able to do what we want to do. And you can see this graph over here. Our goal is to live this graph on my far left, your far right, is that you want to live, do whatever you want to do until your last second and then pass away. That's the ideal. You can see the other graphs, unfortunately, with time, as we approach our last few years, our health, our vitality drops and we can't do what we want to do. So the aim is to keep this excess over here, vitality going for as long as possible until the end and stave off disease. So what we want to do, we want to enjoy our golden years and go even into our diamond years. We want to make sure we're vital and living well as long as we can. So when you think about it, different organisms can live different durations of time. There's some pine trees in Australia that can live thousands of years. In fact, when I was in Vancouver, there was trees in the forest there that can live for over 1,500 years. There are sharks in Greenland which can live over 500 years, and there's Alaskan whales of which we share half their genes, can live for over 200 years. So different animals can live for longer periods of time. Unfortunately, as we age, we are more likely to get more diseases. We all know about smoking. Smoking will increase your risk of cancer by about 5 times. Being 50 years of age will increase your risk of cancer by 100 times. And at 70, the risk increases 1,000 times. So just aging and the cellular processes behind it will increase our chance of getting diseases. So what we want to do, we want to decrease the rate at which our cells age. And we'll be discussing that today. You understand some of the science behind slowing down that process. So the basic blueprint we want to do is slow down the aging. By doing that, the cells will be younger or acting younger, and we will have a slower disease initiation. With less disease being initiated, we will live longer, healthier lives and delay death. So it may sound like, hold on, this guy's got snake oil. What's he selling? What's the story here? Is it too good to be true? Well, I think we are getting closer to that period. We aren't there yet, but we are getting closer to understanding longevity and aging much more clearly. In fact, the World Health Organization recently defined aging as a disease. Once it's defined as a disease, we can then go ahead and look for therapies to try and cure this disease called aging. So I'm going to discuss with you today, give you some clues throughout the talk about one of my heroes. It's a mystery athlete, which maybe you'll guess who it is. I'll give you one clue. It's a male. He's well in his 80s, can still compete at a very high level, and has great physical and mental acuity, and has actually got a great sense of humor still. So as we go through the talk, I'll give you more hints who this is. Anybody seen the documentary on Netflix about the blue zones? If you haven't seen it, it's a great documentary, and it's pretty much the first part of this talk summarizes a bit of that blue zone documentary on Netflix. I think it's to Live to 100 or something. I think that's the title. It's very highly rated now on Netflix. So for those of you that don't know about the blue zones, it's parts of the world where people consistently live longer than the average population, and many people in that community live to 100 or more. And the reason it's called the blue zones, anybody know from trivia? The reason it's called the blue zones is because when the person was first experimenting and seeing and researching where these zones were, he put a piece of blue around those areas. So you circled them in blue, and they became the blue zones because of how he circled the places on the map. Now, there are 5 blue zones in the world which have been discovered, and these people tend to live longer than everybody else on the planet. The first one is in Sardinia in Italy, and there the men are the longest living men in the world. They show that a lot of the men there are shepherds. They still exercise and working until their 90s into their 100s. In Okinawa in Japan, that island has much better longevity as compared to the rest of the mainland. Loma Linda, California. Now specifically, only the people in Loma Linda who are in the Seventh-day Adventist community. This is my first time. I won't dance. I'm telling you, I won't dance, because then it'll be a comedy show. It's not meant to be a comedy show. Loma Linda, as I say, the Seventh-day Adventists over there in Nicoria. Let me just go check on that for 1 second, see who's playing back here. Sorry. He had his headphones in, didn't know I was back here, so I apologize for that. So the Seventh-day Adventist community in Loma Linda also have a longer lifespan. Ikaria in Greece, only that island in Greece, not the other islands, as well as in Costa Rica in a certain area called Nicoya in Costa Rica, and people there are also much more likely to live a longer lifespan. So what do these people have in common? What are the characteristics? And the researchers have divided this into 9 common features. And I've myself divided it further into 2 subsections. The first is physical, which I'm sure you think about anyway. It's We have to move. These people move. They aren't at their computers all the time watching TV on their sofas. These people are moving. They don't eat too much. And what they do eat is largely plant-based. And if they do drink alcohol, they drink alcohol in moderation. Now, the social part of it is probably as important as the physical component. These people all have a sense of purpose. They don't retire and do nothing and sit at home. They have a full life and they are a part of their community from birth until death. They prioritize stress relief and sleep. They're very part of the community. They integrate with their community as well. They do put their family first, and they wonder if their families are close to them. Their families aren't all over the world. And also, their friends support their social behavior. If you think about it, if your friends are all skydiving and taking drugs and living a crazy lifestyle, the chances are you'll also. But if your friends are all into health and longevity, the chances are you also will. So they choose their friend circles very, very carefully. Now, just a bit more about the importance of that social connection. It's been shown that prolonged isolation is equivalent health-wise to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, as well as being shown to may decrease your longevity by about 15 years. So we do need other people. It also increases the chance of dementia, increases the chance of diabetes as well. I'm not sure if you saw, there's a recent study, Harvard study, which followed people for 85 years, maybe it's 86 years by now, and follows them in their lifespan, what they've done. And what they found was that the happiest participants were those people that had good relationships. And when they questioned them further and about the one thing they would change in their lives, almost uniformly, every single one said they would work less and spend more time with their family and friends. So going back to our mystery athlete, you can see what he does. He basically encompasses these blue zones entirely. Great social network, great purpose. He exercises, he doesn't eat too much, and he can still function at a very high level following this blue life. Now, this is a portion of the talk which I apologize for. It can be a bit complicated, it can be a bit scientific, but I think once you understand this, you understand why what we're doing affects our longevity. So here we go. So the simple way of looking at longevity is this: in our body we have trillions of cells. What they're going to do is either they're going to rest and regenerate or divide. Those are the two distinctions. So if they're resting, they can regenerate, they can fix up the internal components of the cells and recycle things. If you're dividing, you want the cells to divide exactly accurately. So you want the 10th division of the cell to be the same copy as the very first division, going all the way down until we die. So those are two separations, resting or dividing. Forget that part. That's most of the science that you understand behind these cells. So what you only could do is, again, only repair the cell when the resting has been completed and things are fixed up in the cell. Now, as you know, there's code inside each cell in the genetic material, and we want that to be passed down with each division of the cell. If that division isn't accurate and the cells divide with the code being inaccurate, different things will happen. If there's too much code and the cell coding goes crazy, you can get then tumor cells, cancer cells being formed. If your code is deficient in information, those cells can die. So it's very important that these cells divide. When they do divide, they divide accurately. So we've said we want the cells to rest. Now, there are small stresses we can apply to the cells to make them rest. And there's this process called hormesis. Now, hormesis is a process where the cells respond to a moderate stress. So there's a small stress, it's applied to the cell, and then the cell will rest, and it'll activate longevity genes. So some of these stresses which you can do to our cells to activate these longevity genes are exercise, diet, intermittent fasting, and exposure to either a hot temperature or a cold temperature. And by making these cell rests, that's how we start longevity, getting those cells to rest. So some cells, unfortunately, stop multiplying, and they are called what's called senescent cells or zombie cells. And these cells sit around to take up space, don't do much, but they give off chemicals that produce inflammation. That inflammation is going to cause inflammation locally to the cells around it, as well as cells all over the body. So what you want to do is get those zombie cells out of the way as much as possible. Now, there is a process in the body called autophagy. Now, autophagy is a process whereby these zombie cells or these senescent cells are broken down by the body. And what happens is, it's like a Pac-Man coming and eating up these damaged cells or these old cells. What it'll do is it'll take those cellular components, repackage them, break them down, and use them again. And then those cell parts can then be used in new cells. It also can break down as well bacteria and viruses. So as you can see, we need autophagy to maintain our health. The problem is, as we age, our ability to perform autophagy decreases. So with a decreased autophagy, we get more and more of these zombie cells accumulating, more and more of this chemicals being released, which cause inflammation, and that's a bad thing. So what we need to do is find ways to increase the autophagy and decrease the cell division and let those cells rest. Now, we'll discuss how that happens in a minute. Another complicated term is mTOR. It's mammalian targeted rapamycin. Now, if you remember, we said earlier, we don't want the cells to divide too rapidly. We need time for the cells to rest and recuperate themselves. And mTOR is a protein that, when stimulated, makes cells divide. So we do need some activity of mTOR, otherwise cells wouldn't divide. But we want to limit its use, limit its stimulation, so cells can rest more. And excess activity of mTOR has been linked to various diseases, such as cancer, arthritis, the body not being able to work with insulin very well, it's called insulin resistance, osteoporosis, and other diseases. So we want to basically not activate mTOR too much. So we do some nutrients like leucine. Now, leucine is an amino acid found in protein, which will activate mTOR, which is not a good thing. And some hormones also activate mTOR, like insulin. So people with diabetes eating too much meat are stimulating too much mTOR, which is really not good for us. What we want to do is limit the mTOR activity, and we can do this by certain components we can do, and I'll describe that in the next slide, what we can do to decrease the mTOR activity. But when we limit mTOR activity, remember what happens. There's less cell division. Therefore, there's more survival by increasing our DNA repair. There's less zombie cells. So with less zombie cells, you're going to get less inflammation, and we're going to go ahead and reuse cellular components. And also with autophagy, we can go ahead and kill those cancer cells. So a good thing to decrease the effect of mTOR. So again, how do we go ahead and limit our mTOR activity? The same themes and keep reoccurring: exercise, fasting, vitamin D, caffeine, turmeric, and then certain drugs. One's called metformin, is a drug which can be used for diabetes. Resveratrol, that's the stuff that's found in red wine. And then you have rapamycin, which is a anti-cancer medication as well. Okay, so you've spoken about the cells resting. Now we're going to talk about the cells dividing. We need to make sure that when they divide in an accurate manner, and the division is the same from generation to generation of cell. So there's a certain enzyme called the sirtuins. Now the sirtuin's job is to make sure that when the cells divide, the division is accurate and exact copies are made with each cell generation. So basically, these sirtuins control our life and our survival, because if the sirtuin function goes down, we get bad copies of our DNA, And you can imagine what happens once the bad copies are made. We can't function anymore. Now, there is something we can do about this, because the energy supplied to sirtuins is by something called NAD, which is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, just NAD. That's the powerhouse that powers up the sirtuins, which makes sure the DNA is dividing correctly. So again, as I said, sirtuins prevent abnormal cell division. And here's one. There's been studies from yeast all the way to other animals as well, showing that if the sirtuin function is boosted with increased NAD, you get improved DNA repair, your memory is better, there's also better exercise endurance and better weight control and longevity as well, with increased sirtuin function with increased NAD. So remember, the NAD powers the sirtuins to make sure that the cells are dividing correctly. And as we age, unfortunately, our NAD levels drop. We aren't able to power those sirtuins, and errors occur in gene replication with the cell division. And this is the reason why, this slide over here is the reason why it's thought that elderly people are more likely to develop age-related diseases than younger people, because of the lack of NAD, which can't power the sirtuins, which can't get the cells to divide correctly. However, I have good news. We can increase our NADs in our body. So what we can do with exercise, with calorie restriction, and with micro stresses can all result in an increased NAD. Plus, you can take supplements in nicotinamide ribonucleotide, as well as NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, are two things we can take to increase our NAD levels. By having increased NAD, increase sirtuin activity, and then increase longevity and decrease aging. So NAD is one of the current theories of why we have aging-related diseases. So again, how do you increase your NAD levels in your sirtuin activity? Well, again, exercise, fasting, diet, supplements, and then what we eat. There's certain foods called the polyphenols, and the polyphenols are very good in increasing our NAD levels. Some of these are green tea, extra virgin olive oil, turmeric, coffee, berries, dark leafy greens, and dark chocolate. Now, the dark chocolate is without the sugar, not with the sugar. I mean, it's always make that distinction. So it's very simple. Eating a healthy diet can definitely help us. And you're going to see a theme throughout my series about what we can do to generate good health. Now, one of the preeminent researchers now in anti-aging or aging theories is David Sinclair. He's at Harvard. He's a lab in Harvard. And this is one of his quotes from a recent paper of his. It says, "We believe it's the loss of information that causes aging, a loss of the cell's ability to read its original DNA, so it forgets how to function. Much in the same way, an old computer may develop corrupted software." So what he said before is basically getting those sirtuins working, powered by NAD, will decrease this loss of information, which leads to aging. I know it's been a ton of information, very complex, but I think you understand the basic science behind it, I hope, that the first thing we need to do is let the cells rest and repair. Where we can let them rest and repair is limiting the mTOR activity, so the cells don't divide and there's time to fix up the internal housekeeping, repair elements, so when it comes time to divide, they can divide, and also this will give the body time to increase your autophagy. With autophagy, we can break down the zombie cells and break down cancer cells. We want to have hormesis, which is small stresses on the cells, so which will slow down the division process. And also need to make sure there's enough NAD in our bodies that can power those sirtuins to get accurate genetic copies. That's the hardest part for you guys to think about. There's a lot of science over there, but I think you understand now the difference between resting and dividing cells, and the emphasis on making sure only to divide when the cells are rested and repaired. So if you think about it, a few decades ago, many cancers were totally untreatable. And with new therapies, previous diseases that were totally deadly are now treatable. And I had one of my colleagues, her husband had melanoma all over his body. This is about 10 years ago. Went to MD Anderson, a cancer hospital in Houston, and he was treated, and he's fine today. Immunotherapy. In the same way, people with lung cancer who had a death sentence a number of years ago are treated with immunotherapies. So we are making inroads to cancer based upon new knowledge. The question is, are we getting any closer with anti-aging theory? So before I go any further, we do not have any completed randomized controlled clinical trials with different medications and different treatments for anti-aging. So what we'll be discussing over here are current theories, what can be used, what is being used, and also the science behind what is being used. So the first thing is to differentiate between biological aging and chronological aging. Two different things. Every year we get a year older, but what we want to do is slow down our biological aging. That's the rate at which the aging process in our body occurs. Now, these are the best measures we have right now to measure aging within the body. The first method is called the Horvath clock. What this is that with time, our chromosomes get methylated or get damaged with time, and there's a relationship between time or your age and the amount of methylation or damage to those chromosomes, and we can tell roughly your age based on that methylation of the chromosomes. Another method is looking at telomeres. Telomeres are little caps on the tops of your chromosomes, and with age, the telomeres drop down, and with less telomeres, the chromosomes can't divide accurately, and that's also can be seen for aging. Plus, we can do physical tests. How many push-ups can you do? Can you get out from sitting quickly? Can you get out from the floor without using your hands or one hand? So there are different measures of your physical ability as well with different challenges. What you want to do is have a higher chronological age, but a lower biological age. So I'm going to start summarizing it all together now. What are the 5 keys to longevity that my mom taught me, which is actually borne out in the science as well? So first of all, you want to be careful what you put into your body. What do you eat? Sleep, exercise, making time for loved ones, as well as taking your supplements as the 5th bullet. So looking at this slide, you can see immediately what's healthy, what isn't healthy, may be delicious, but we all know not so good for us. I think I can't stress enough the importance of limiting sugars and processed carbohydrates in our diet. You'll see throughout my next lectures, you're going to see the importance of decreasing and even eliminating these for our health. We've seen with the blue zones how people have mainly a plant-based diet and limit animal protein. You want to limit your intake of processed foods. Don't eat too much. Obviously, don't smoke. And also, which we don't think about very much, is limit the amount of time we spend a day eating. And I think it's kind of strange to talk about on a cruise ship to limit our eating, but it doesn't apply on cruise ships. All the science doesn't happen on a cruise ship. When on land, it's going to start happening again. But once you're back on land again, go ahead and, if you can, limit the time you spend eating. Because there's been tons of studies which have all shown the same thing. If you eat less, you live more. Obviously, you don't have malnutrition, but all life forms, from bacteria all the way through humans, if you limit the amount of food or intake that they get, they will live longer. Even the Okinawans, who eat less than people on the mainland, live longer than the counterparts on the mainland. And when they leave Okinawa to the mainland, they will then go ahead and get the same lifespan of the diseases as people on the mainland. Now, we discussed earlier about starting later. Is it a problem? No. Obviously, the sooner you start, the better, but those changes in the body begin rapidly once you start making these changes. I know for myself, I was overworked, I was out of shape, I was really not in good shape at all until I started following these regimens, and my life has changed. And I'll show you some examples later what I've done and how that's helped me as well, including intermittent fasting or time-controlled eating. Now, I'm going to bring this bullet up right now just to highlight again the importance of how dangerous this hormone called insulin is. Talk about it some more and the diet lectures coming up. But insulin being raised will increase the chance of getting obesity. It will increase the chance of getting diabetes, heart disease. We saw how the effects on mTOR, it's going to decrease lifespan, decrease life expectancy, and also increase our risk for various cancers. So this is a little teaser of what's coming up with diet and exercise in the next couple of days. Now, we did mention, I don't know if you remember, I gave a lot of information. We did mention that leucine, which is an amino acid inside animal protein, stimulates mTOR, which makes cells divide more quickly, which is not a good thing. So we do need protein for muscle formation as well as for enzymes and hormone production. So we do need a lot of protein on the one hand. On the other hand, we don't want too much animal protein because that goes ahead and stimulates mTOR. So it's a balancing act. And the way to get by that is eat more vegetable-based as opposed to more animal-based proteins, and especially try and avoid processed meats. But we definitely need those proteins. Sleep, vital for our longevity. We should have 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And sleep, once we sleep, we go sleep, we wake up and we feel fine. But there is so much happening behind the scenes when we're sleeping. What it does is the body clears out the waste that we accumulate during the day from being awake, or the metabolic activity of the brain working during the day. And it's really important to have a good night's sleep to prevent diseases and maintain our health. Also, without enough sleep, our brains can't function properly, and we can't concentrate, our memory formation is bad, and we have poor decision making. So sleep, crucial. Again, we all get irritable and ratty when we don't have a good night's sleep. We don't have a positive mood. Our weight will definitely go up with poor sleep. We get cortisol being produced, which makes us gain weight, essentially, with a poor night's sleep. And also, you just can't perform at your best. If you get injured, you can't recover as well. Sleep is definitely the heal-all for many of our problems. The other big thing we need to do is look at exercise. Now, I won't confirm or deny that this has been photoshopped, but that's why I'm wearing a jacket, to keep you all confused. And I don't go in the pool either. But anyway, the important thing is we will need to decrease the effect of something called sarcopenia, which basically means muscle loss. As we get older, we lose muscle mass. And from the age of about 30, we lose about a few percent every decade of our muscle mass. And what we need the muscle for, the decrease in muscle mass is caused by different hormones. People sit around, aren't active, and also poor nutrition. And going back to those Okinawans and those people in the blue zones, they were active. They weren't as big as that picture of me, but they were live, they had active muscles, and they were using their muscles their whole life. They didn't sit around and let those muscles waste away so much. The problem is, with our population currently, we have loss of muscle mass. If you have a fall and break a bone, your chance of dying within that year is like 50%. We need that muscle mass to be extremely intact to help us balance and to keep ourselves strong. Muscle is also important as a sink for glucose. So excess glucose we eat will go into our cells and be stored there for when it's needed later. With less muscle mass, there's more glucose going around the body and a higher chance of developing diabetes. So we actually can avoid muscle mass as we age. And I'm not that big in reality, but since I've started exercising and changed my diet, I've gotten stronger and I've gained muscle mass, all through following these regimens. What you should do is resistance training, muscles, weights to build your muscles, rubber bands, floor exercises, yoga and stretch. Also make sure you eat enough protein every day to feed those muscles and to feed those enzymes and hormones. Again, remember, we want these micro stresses. We talk about these small stresses to make the cells rest and to increase longevity. And exercise is an excellent form of a micro stress in these bodies. What we want to do is raise our NAD levels, and exercising will raise our NAD levels, which again, to remind you, increase our sirtuins, help with cell division, and also exercise also inhibits mTOR activity. So it's both increasing NAD, which is making the cells divide better when they do divide, and also inhibits mTOR, which lets the cells rest. So it's definitely helping the body through both aspects of rest and repair. Also, exercise will build new blood vessels and make you feel a whole lot better. Now, I've got balance over there as an important bullet. We don't often think of the importance of balance. And I was in the gym the other day and I saw somebody doing balance exercise. I thought, that's so impressive, because most people never work on balance. And obviously, if your muscles are out of balance, you fall over, those fractures occur, and they can be lethal. A very simple way to start off with balance is when you're in the line at the restaurant, just let's stand on one foot or the other. I know it's difficult now with the ship rocking, but just simple things to start with your balance and then get more and more advanced to build up that balance in your body. Really important to avoid those falls and fractures. Now, I'm sure you've seen tons of studies about exercise, because there are tons of studies about exercise and they all show pretty much the same thing. Exercise is good. I've just listed 2 studies over here. The one showed that people who jogged more than people that were sedentary had better biological age based on their telomere studies, 10 years younger, just by jogging half an hour a day, 5 times a week. The second was looking at the duration of exercise versus intensity of exercise, and this showed that either there's group A, which had a longer duration of lower intensity, versus group B with a high intensity for a shorter duration, and both of those decreased the risk of death. What's interesting is the more you exercise, the more your chance of death decreases. So the more you can exercise, obviously within limits, the better for your health. We discussed also earlier about microstress. One of them was temperature. And here's the study looking at a study from Finland, where about 2,300 men were studied for 20 years. And the routine there is they have a sauna very often, I believe. And on average, these men spend 14 minutes in the sauna for a temperature of 175 Fahrenheit, which is about 80 centigrade. And they broke them down into the amount of time people spent in the sauna. And you can see those that went once a week had a 51% chance of being alive after 20 years, up to those that went to 4 to 7 times a week, were up to 69%. So the more time they spent in the sauna, the better. And right now, the current theory is the optimum dose of sauna is 15 minutes a session with 175 degrees for a total of an hour a week. Current theory. Going more than half an hour may be detrimental to your health. So 15 minutes 4 times a week is supposed to be healthy and decrease your chance from heart disease and stress. So our mystery athlete, as I say, is in his late 80s. He still does 300 sit-ups a day. He does push-ups every day, and he does a leg press of 300 pounds a day. Now, when I saw this is a few months ago, I'm almost 60, and I thought, I can't do 300-pound leg press, and I couldn't. And I started working on my leg press. I thought, how can he beat me? I'm a bit competitive, as you may think. And I'm now at about 500-pound leg press. And it just goes to show you, in a few months, working consistently, it can be done. It's never too late to start these exercises. And my health has, as I say, improved. My strength has improved, and I feel a whole lot better. Again, we mentioned making time for our loved ones. Here's a study from the people from Roseto in Italy. In the 1800s, the community moved across and formed a new city or new town called Roseto in Pennsylvania. In the mid-1950s, a doctor was researching why these people lived longer than people in the general community in the rest of the U.S. They had less heart disease than other people in the U.S., despite they had bad eating habits. They smoked and didn't exercise and were pretty much overweight. What he found was they had a fantastic social structure. They were a very tight community. They lived together. They worked together. And this allowed them to have a longevity rate way higher than most parts of the U.S. Now, I'm going to pause for a second over here about supplements. I think I must emphasize we need to do the hard work before we take the supplements. Taking the supplements on their own isn't a magic cure to longevity. In combination, together they will work very well. So, as we age, our bodies can absorb nutrients less efficiently. So therefore, what we do need may not be there, although we're eating it, as not absorbed into our bodies as well. So therefore, we may be at risk for more health problems due to lack of absorption. So here's a list of some of the more common supplements. There are hundreds of supplements, and people always are asking me about different supplements, and I do research, and there is data behind them. But I think to take too many supplements, we don't know how they interact with each other. And I was speaking to somebody recently, told me he was taking about 150 supplements, and he had abnormal liver functions. And his doctor said to him, stop everything, and then slowly see why you're taking each one, and take each supplement as needed. His liver function test returned to normal, and he takes much less supplements now. So I think a more targeted approach is better than taking everything. But these are some of the more common supplements that can be taken. The first one, vitamin D. Because we have less exposure to sunlight these days, our vitamin D levels are almost uniformly low. I'm sure you remember from COVID, most people in the ICUs had a low vitamin D level as compared to people not in the ICU. So vitamin D is crucial to our immunity and to many of our biochemical functions in the body. Again, I mentioned resveratrol, which is derived from red wine. To take that gram a day, you need to drink about 100 bottles of wine to get that amount of resveratrol. It may be more fun drinking the wine than taking the tablet, but more practical taking the tablet every day, and has many different functions in the body to help us with longevity. NMN, we mentioned NMN earlier, helps with increasing the NAD, powers the sirtuins for better cell division. Interesting thing, I've been taking NMN for about 2 years now, and there's now Dr. Sinclair, from one of the earlier slides, is now researching this as a therapy, and it's becoming very hard to find NMN now because he's using this drug for clinical trials to try and find a link with longevity and make this a drug to be prescribed by a physician. Creatine, it helps with muscle growth, muscle strength, and mental acuity. I was hesitant for a long time. I started taking this, and I've seen a great improvement since I started taking creatine in terms of muscle strength. Metformin is a drug used for diabetes. It was thought that metformin may help with longevity. A study done some time ago, recent data brings it into question, but there is still no prospective study looking forward on the effects of metformin. And for right now, I'm holding off on taking metformin. Unless you have diabetes, then it's a good drug to take. But other than that, for longevity purposes, metformin is a drug that I'm not taking right now. People are taking aspirin as an anti-inflammatory, especially after having a heart attack. And then another drug called rapamycin, which is also used for cancer therapy, which inhibits mTOR. And some people believe we should all be on rapamycin at all times. So depending who you read and who you listen to, there are enthusiasts for every different supplement under the sun. Gary Player. Anybody guess that? Excellent. So Gary Player is 87 years old. He still shoots under his hand, he still shoots under his age. He's a great ambassador for golf, and actually we went to the same high school. Different times, but the same high school. So to summarize this all, I think we've seen the importance really of the basics. It isn't rocket science what we need to do. We need to have a good night's sleep. Exercise continuously. You can't exercise hard for a week and then never exercise for 3 more months. It's got to be a consistent exercise program. We need to have a plant-based diet and limit those processed foods, limit the sugars, and limit the amount of time that we spend eating every day. Again, I'll say it again, sugars and carbohydrates are really a problem in our diet these days. Social connections cannot be overestimated. It's so important to have a tight social network, and if you move to a different town, join a club, join a religious organization, but have that social connection, because that definitely will increase your lifespan. Obviously, don't smoke, and try and keep your body weight as optimal as you can.
Thank you so much for your time with me today. As I mentioned earlier, I've adopted the tips that I have shared with you in this talk. I sleep better, I'm conscious of what I eat, and I exercise regularly. I feel so much better than I did 10 years ago before I learned how important the 5 keys are. I hope that with what you've learned today, you'll be able to adopt just a few of these principles. Get the same joy and energy that I have. I hope this serves you well. Remember, you have the power to control how long you live and how great you feel. Thank you. I'm Dr. Minkowitz.